Hello, welcome to Taking Liberties, episode 17 of 2018. My name is Lee. I'm in WA, joined by Vikas
Hey, hey.
in Canberra. Sorry for last week. I had internet issues. The NBN co basically gave my internet to somebody else. Like, no joke. They literally moved the cord that sent my internet to my house and put it to somebody else's house. So thanks, government. Thanks for competence. Thanks for disrupting my
That's
podcast.
brilliant. That's brilliant on so many levels.
Our good
That's,
friend, the
that's not to
NBN.
say that's not to say it wouldn't happen with anyone else. I mean, that's effectively
It's true.
that's a patching error.
Yeah.
So it was a physical patching error. So
It's
literally,
physical
someone.
patching area. Like, they literally put the wrong cord in the switchy thing in the neighborhood, and yeah,
Oh, that's
we
hilarious.
had no internet for like a week, which drove me absolutely nuts. Anyway, in the
So
last, oh sorry, go.
that's actually super interesting that it took them. I hope someone at NBN Co is like actually taking that as a customer thing. Like, it's because it should impact their SLAs.
Yeah,
Like if it takes them a week to fix one fuck up.
yeah, it
That's
was. I mean, basically, you call Telstra, and then they're like, "Oh, no, this is not our problem. It's NBN," and blah blah. Just
a chain of
anyway,
escalation.
it is.
Yeah.
It is. So, anyway, this week we're going to talk about the budget. It did come out last week, so that it's been we're recording on a Thursday, so it's been about a week and a half since it came out. But
So everybody's had a chance to percolate on it.
yeah, that's the excuse we'll use
And
rather than we're just really late. So we'll just say that it's given enough people to percolate.
it was a pretty shit budget, though.
It was a nothing budget, which, let's be real, I'd prefer a nothing budget over a good budget by the standards of good
Well,
budgets where it's like spending money they don't have.
well, which is actually interesting because like the mainstream media's sort of reporting on it was this seemed to be a cash splash, and it was definitely an election year budget.
Yep.
To which I basically scratched my head and went like, who are they trying to bribe with this? It's just like, okay, so we're maybe getting $550 back in, what was it, 3 years' time,
Yeah.
I think.
Basically in the long-term future.
Yeah. So it was like, okay, so they're bribing me with a tax cut potentially down the line.
Yep.
And as far as I could tell, the other big ticket items like, education, it was like they funded education last year, so there wasn't anything really in education this year. There really wasn't much that you can point at and go, hey, this is fantastic. And from a libertarian perspective, as much as I like the idea of tax cuts, they didn't seem to go really far. However, one thing that I did notice was, is it my imagination or are journalists becoming less mathematically inclined than they used to be? I mean, like, journalists have always typically been the people who go to school and go, maths is a subject I don't need to care about. And therefore, when they actually do their reporting, they rely on experts to give them numbers and tell them whether it's good or bad.
Yep.
And that's been my experience with journalism for a long time now. But it seems like they've gotten even worse than normal because The Guardian printed something. Sorry, The Guardian reprinted a tweet from a Labour minister verbatim where he goes, someone making $200,000 a year gets $7,000 cash back. Someone earning $40,000 a year only gets $500 cash back. Where's the fairness in that? And I went like, well, yes, but did you notice the ratio is exactly the same?
Yeah.
Because both of them got a 1% tax cut,
Yeah.
right? Both of them got 1%. It's just the guy earning 200,000 pays 16 times more tax
Exactly.
than the guy paying 40,000.
Yeah.
So
Which,
let's just,
I think David Leinholm said something about that, like, that
yeah.
that the 16 times thing, which, I mean, that's the ridiculousness of just this whole debate. Is the only people who pay tax are people who are earning $200,000 a year. Especially once you take into account benefits, like,
Yeah.
the number of people who actually pay tax in this country basically are in the 1%. So yeah, no shit. Of course, if you cut taxes, they're going to get more money back because, well, they're the ones who are funding this whole thing. They're the only ones
Yeah.
who, yeah.
Yeah, I know. I kind of just sat there and went like, I just looked at him and went, are you fucking, it's just like, you do realize both of them got exactly the same tax cut. It's just the guy
Yeah.
literally pays that much more tax.
Yeah.
Right? Do you think they should get exactly the same amount of money back? Then they should be paying exactly the same amount of tax. That's the only way you'll arrive at a situation, right, in taxation where two people get exactly the same amount of money back in a tax cut.
Now, we should actually clarify. In some ways, we're talking about a tax cut, but really what we're talking about is bracket creep. Because that's what's really happening. It's like it's not like they're actually reducing the rates. They're just dicking around with the rates to take more people out of the top bracket and into the middle bracket or the third bracket, the 32.5% bracket.
So what was funny was what was the guy's name? He was the financial advisor during Gillard. The guy keeps picking fights
Henry?
with.
No.
The guy keeps picking fights with the guy. With Sinclair Davidson from RMIT, and he keeps getting his ass schooled. And every time lefties go like, "Oh well." No. He's an academic dude.
Okay, I don't know.
Honestly speaking, he's dumb as a brick. But I don't know.
You did say he's an academic, so you don't need to repeat yourself.
But he keeps picking a fight with Sinclair Davidson. This is how inconsequential he is to me, other than the fact that I know he picks fights with Sinclair Davidson. But he basically brought out the government could fix all of this by indexing bracket creep. So indexing the thingo to the CPI, the tax brackets.
Yep.
At which point I basically went like, holy fucking shit! He actually said something that A, makes sense, and B, right? I'm sure we've been saying for ages. And Sinclair Davidson basically goes like, yeah. So why didn't you suggest it to Gillard in 2012?
Yeah. So I mean, this in some ways there's a perfectly good public choice explanation for this, which is politicians look good when they do this. They can say, "Oh, we've given you a tax cut," when nominally they have, but really what they've just done is they've just taken you out of one bucket and put you in a different one. They haven't actually reduced the rates.
Yeah.
And so essentially that's what they've been doing every year for the last, really since Abbott. I don't recall a time in any of their budgets where they haven't done something to do with adjusting the brackets. And
so the person who made this famous is actually Peter Costello, because Peter Costello is known as a massive tax cutter, right? But realistically, all he did was just kept moving up the brackets.
Yep.
So I mean, you're absolutely right. They look like heroes for doing it, but the people who say like the tax bracket should be indexed are absolutely right.
Yeah, and I think pretty much like, is there anyone in the normal commentariat as opposed to crazy Marxists who want everybody to be taxed like 100%? Basically every economist would say you need to index the brackets. Like every business and journalist, all of them are on the same page. The only people who are not on the same page are the politicians themselves. So it's not that controversial.
No.
Maybe we should move on to some of the other sort of bits and pieces that have come up. So let's talk about the cash thing.
Yeah, I was going to mention the cash one as well. This is
like, most of this budget was like, okay, whatever, bit of money here, bit of slushing of the pig trough over here. And then they brought out this thing, which is really one of our favorite things in these budgets, which is trying to crack down on black market activity, which is always,
black money.
Yeah. They're always going after it. They're always doling out hundreds of millions of dollars to try and claw back, X amount, billions of dollars out of the black market, and they never do. And normally that's just dumb. But this time it's actually like genuinely malicious and like incredibly stupid, which is, for the benefit of those who don't know what it is, essentially from like next year or whenever it's going to be, you won't be able to do cash transactions in quantities larger than $10,000. Essentially the government is banning cash transactions over 10 grand.
Yep. Which is quite frankly galling that they'd actually even try it. But at the same time, it should not surprise us. And other countries have kind of done this. So India famously got rid of the 500 rupee note and 100 rupee note based on the...
It was 1,500, I think it was.
No, they got rid of 1,000 ages ago. So really? It was the 500 and one. Yeah, it was the 500 and 100.
Oh my goodness.
So
people were supposed to walk away with like wallets like 2 feet wide of just all the cash they're going to carry.
Yeah. So it was inconvenient, but then they brought them back.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. In a different. Yeah.
As a different style. So they brought them back after 2 years or something. So they brought the 2,000 and the 100 back Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, you're right. It was the 1,500 because they didn't have a 100.
Yep.
They'd gotten rid of the 100 earlier,
Yep.
and then they got rid of the 500 and 1,000. They brought back the 100 and 2,000.
Right. Okay.
That's right. Yeah. So, but
All of
you
which
know,
was announced like overnight, like literally, 9 p.m. The Prime Minister got up and said, "Oh yeah, at 12 o'clock your notes are worthless, but for this period of time you can trade them in." At the bank, it only had set them. It's just anyway.
Yeah. They said you can trade it in the bank you can trade 250,000 of them in the bank or something like that. It was
so Planet Money did a really good podcast on this. I might put it in the show notes of going through what happened and how just monstrously evil it actually was. But anyway,
but it did.
Sorry, go.
It did clear up their black money problem at an immense cost to the economy, at an immense cost to individuals.
Yeah,
and it's skeptical whether it actually truly cleared it up or not, because obviously there's ways to launder money.
Yes. Yeah. Anyway, that's something somewhat different, though. The people who the wonks who advocate for this kind of thing also advocate for the abolition of cash, which which is kind of dumb. But anyway, one of the good things about the media is whenever the government brings out some sort of change, they always go hunting down the people who are going to be affected. And there's been a number of stories that I've seen which have talked to people who deal in cash. That's their thing, like
cash businesses. Yeah.
So basically, it's making the use of cash illegal, which is just really stupid. And people who have got legitimate business activities are going to find themselves like having to effectively act like a black market in order to deal with this. So it's just
to be perfectly honest, though. I mean, from a libertarian perspective, we just look at money and go like, that's fiat cash, right? Like it's made by the government.
Sure.
Right. So my question is, since it's not sound money, right? Why the fuck should we care? Like why would people who believe in sound money care? Right about
Well, because it's an attack on freedom. Like even if the money is like stupidly produced, it's still the way people do their business. Like, it's still the way they go about their lives. Yeah, and essentially.
I guess I was trying to say, like, I understand why I'm pissed about it. I understand why you'd be pissed about it.
Yeah.
I guess I was trying to get at why the gold bugs would be pissed at it, because they're the loudest whinging about fiat currencies, where government, they're like, it's fiat currency, it's fake money. Yeah. And it's just like, the government is trying to tell me what to do with my fake money. And I'm just there going like, you people perplex me.
Yeah. So it's also worth noticing that ASIO gets another little $24 million to their budget, because, what we need more of is more government spying.
That's actually quite small.
It's quite small. Still a lot of money. Considering that they've it's like a little bit on top of the massive pile they got in the last. I mean, I think funding for those agencies has gone up by like 5 times. It's 5 times larger than it was back since like 2001.
Yeah. But look, my point there is, if you count all of the increases that they've gotten, 24 million is actually quite tiny.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like I'm genuinely surprised. I guess they haven't been delivering the right level of fear to the government.
Yeah, that's it.
They've only scrounged 24 million. So
just need that extra little dose of scariness.
Yeah.
All right. Well, is there anything else that you saw in the budget that you thought was noteworthy?
No, not really. Like I said, it's been a very lackluster. There wasn't anything that immediately popped out to me and went like. So my main comment is basically along the lines of, I don't know why the media is so excited about it. It seemed like a fairly boring budget.
Yeah, but I mean, it is an election year, and one thing we have not seen for a very long time in politics is any measure of courage in an election year. So Rudd and Gillard played it very safe in election years. Abbott and Turnbull have both played it very safe. Probably even safer, because they've probably been on Abbott wasn't even on a smaller margin. He was just useless. So Turnbull's sitting on a pretty slim margin. So
but also, you don't know how all those 4 by-elections go.
Well, that's it. Yeah. So I mean, that's something that
we could talk about as well. But
yeah, it'd be an interesting test to see how Bill Shorten goes, because obviously,
well, actually,
Labor's doing well on the polls, so they're up. I think it's still 47-53. There's going to be at least 4 by-elections, maybe more.
Yeah.
Because I think there's it seems every day brings new Labor, another couple of Labor MPs into potential trouble with Section 44.
Yeah, which is something that needs to be brought up. So Labor. So for anyone for anyone during the last bout who was watching all these Liberal MPs going down the drain, you might have noticed that Labor wasn't sending anyone, and that's because Bill Shorten basically wrote a letter to Malcolm saying, "I'm not going to refer anyone," because the two parties have always had a long-standing agreement that neither of them will refer. They don't refer each other's members to the High Court, right?
Yep.
And that. And
How
if you think about it,
lovely of them. Isn't it great to know that our politicians have, in a bipartisan consensus, to ignore the Constitution?
Okay, so I actually kind of agree with them on it, and the reason why is actually it's based on my understanding of the bureaucracy, effectively. So what would happen if you think about it? A party wins power, right, and they'll have the majority. They'll have the majority seats, right? They could technically, on that high, right, on any seats that are close to the margins, right, and if that person has, because it's a court of disputed returns, right? You can find something on them or whatever it is, right? If you find something on someone to force another by-election, or rather force them to leave in a scandal, what you can have is a situation where the winning party increases their margin effectively by referring members to the High Court, right? So to avoid that situation, right? To avoid that situation where to sort of make the rules of the game more fair, or rather more fair to the governance of the country, or more stability, right? They basically said each party will refer its own members. It's just it's like an additional rule on top to try and bring a little bit of stability, or rather stop the winning party from trying to cause more instability.
Sure, but it's relatively straightforward. Well, theoretically straightforward to not be a foreign, like a dual citizen.
So
it's in the end, it's turned out in some areas it's been a bit complicated. But say that they didn't have that rule in place, none of what we would seen would have been an issue. There's been no changes to the constitutional standard for measuring who's ineligible on the basis of citizenship. It's the same rule that they've had for however long. And there's been we've had about 10 so far, people dropping out. No, more than that. It's probably, I don't know, it must be about 15 people that now dropped out of Parliament because of not following the Constitution, not being constitutionally elected. Now, if this had, and that's just in the current crop, if you think about what we've discovered about immigration law and citizenship law, it's quite possible that there's whole swathes of people who are not in Parliament anymore who would have all been invalid the entire time. So maybe actually it would have been better for the purpose of obeying the Constitution if they actually did refer each other.
Yeah, probably. But then again,
we would know the rules, and we would have known the rules. People would know the ruls for ages. Every person would be okay, this is how we figure out if you're just an Australian citizen or a dual citizen. There'd be no confusion because it would have already been hammered out decades ago.
Well, you're placing a lot of faith there in the High Court for consistent decisions. And
from what I understand, my lawyer friends, they've said that everything that has happened so far in the current crop of Section 44, all of it's consistent with...
Current crop, I will give you. You can find a literal straight back, right, to every single one of them. So, for example, Katie Gallagher's is linked almost identically to Malcolm Roberts' one, the One Nation one. So I
think the precedent, I can't remember the name of the precedent. This is where we need Zeev. Zeev's not here. But the precedent they're referring on is something, and that precedent I think is from the mid-90s.
So Sue versus Hill.
I honestly can't tell you. I feel bad. If you're a lawyer and you're listening, please come and email us. What's our email? Do we have an email? Anyway, go to the Facebook page and abuse us for not understanding constitutional law like we should. Yeah. But nevertheless... the precedent they've been applying is
the precedents they've applied to the current crop, as far as I understand it, they point directly back to things. But if you take a look at the ones from the previous crop, right? So take a look at Canavan and Barnaby Joyce are the best example of that, right? Canavan and Barnaby Joyce both were born to parents. They basically got their citizenship du sanguine or de sanguine or whatever it is, a legal principle that says through blood, right? So they both acquired it by blood. In the case of Canavan, it was his mum, right? In the case of Barnaby Joyce, it was his dad.
Sykes versus Cleary. That's it. That's the one.
Sykes versus Cleary. Okay, yeah. All right, Sykes versus Cleary. Okay.
There you go. Anyway, so okay.
So if you take, so what I'm saying is, if the best example of where they've come with two contradictory rulings is if you take a look at the Canavan and Barnaby Joyce case. Both of those guys got their citizenship from parents, right? They were born in Australia, both of them.
Yeah.
Right? Now, Barnaby Joyce was ruled as falling foul of Section 44, and it was New Zealand. Matt Canavan was found safe from Section 54 because it was Italy. That's literally the only reason.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, the basis of this thing is like determined on foreign citizenship law, which is why it's so kind of silly.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, the criteria from you know, seeing people on like my lawyer friends on Facebook and like Lorraine Finlay, who's she's a constitutional lecturer at Murdoch in Western Australia. She spoke at a thing when I was at, and talked like just on the day that I think the day after they ruled on the Gallagher case, the Gallagher case, and she said that this entire schmozzle, this entire tawdry affair, I love the word tawdry, is entirely being consistent with Sykes versus Cleary. Like every single one of them, like there has been some discussion about, you know, but it's the same test. They're playing the same test, and it's that. And her response, Lorraine Finlay, was like, because you know she sort of went on the radio and commenting how everybody was so shocked that Katie Gallagher was found ineligible, but Finlay was like, no, actually, she fits. You know, they applied the exact same test as everybody else we've seen so far, and he got the exact same outcome. Yeah. So, I mean, really, it's
no.
It has been consistent. Like and that's the thing. Like and presumably had, you know, I don't know. I mean, when did Scott Ludlam become during the Senate? Would have been sort of mid 2000s. You know, if people had disputed his eligibility, presumably they would have applied Sykes versus Cleary just the same as before.
The Sykes versus Cleary one was reasonable steps have to be taken.
Yeah.
Right? So what I'm saying is there's a lot of leeway on what reasonable steps constitute, right?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So that's my point. And as far as I can tell, the reason why they said the reason based on the adjudication stuff which is online, in the case of Barnaby Joyce, was they basically said you could go online and look up the name, right? Well, as if with Italian one, you actually had to ask the Italian consulate. Yeah. Right? And that's the only difference, right, between the two.
And some people like, what's his name? Dastiari, he couldn't relinquish his Iranian citizenship because they won't allow him to do it. And so he just had to sign an affidavit saying, I hereby relinquish it, and that's the end of it. And I think the same with, what's her name? The Labour gay senator, her name escapes me.
Penny Wong.
Penny Wong. So I think she has had issues as well involving, I think she's like Malaysian citizenship.
Yeah.
And it seems sort of thing where it's like she couldn't relinquish it by like through the rules, so she just signs the thing saying.
Well, no. So the rules as far as her thing go. So she had to, because she was of age and when she was a citizen, right? They won't relinquish it until she does a year of civil service. Right. She didn't want to go back and do a year of civil service. Fair enough. Which is neither would I. Yeah. Civil service laws are stupid.
Yes.
But anyway.
But like, in those cases, like the test is still the same. It's not like they're pulling stuff out of their ass and just like, oh, we'll just do whatever you want. It's did you take reasonable steps?
But that's never been my contention. That's never been anyone's contention. The contention that people have had is the test is applied. It's just not applied in the same way, right? They apply it in a certain, like, for example, like,
it's not like a standardized test. It's not like, did I do this thing tick? Did I do this thing tick? Did I do this thing tick? Okay, you're fine. Yeah. That's a fair criticism in.
Like, do you think do you think that, okay, like I would say that it's unfair for the regard of you can go online and search it, right? I don't think that's necessarily appropriate. Like to say like, hey, just because you can do that, right? Then the bar for saying that you're a citizen is much lower.
Well, I mean, the
right?
reality is though, the people who've been found out have taken no steps.
Sure.
Like they didn't do anything. So I mean, like it's one thing to say like if it's inherently difficult, which I mean, say we were talking about 30.
Hey, look, Matt Canavan took no steps either, right? The only difference was, like I said, you can Google and check on the New Zealand site, as you actually have to approach the Italian Ministry for Canavan, right? That's literally the only difference.
Sure.
And based on a perceived difficulty, right? They said the fact that one person took no steps was reasonable, and another person who took no steps was unreasonable.
Well, I mean,
now while the test is the same, it is not applied equally.
So if these cases have been happening in the mid-90s, when you couldn't just Google your immigration status or your citizenship status, I imagine many more of them would have fallen on the lines of Matt Canavan, because who the hell wants to deal with foreign citizenship laws? Like, I mean, if it wasn't for the fact that I could literally jump online and go tick 3 boxes and say, yes, I'm a British citizen, which I am, which I found out as a result of this Section 44 stuff because my dad was born in England.
Yeah.
Like I would have no idea.
Wait, hang on. That's not necessarily true, right? Which type of British citizenship do you have, right? Because it's a very particular type of British citizenship. Yeah, that's another thing, right?
Well, I am a British citizen. Like, that's all that really matters in terms of, like, can I run for parliament? Which the answer is now no, even though I did actually run in 2010. So, it's... I mean, a lot of this to do with the fact, like, why these people aren't testing is because it seems completely unreasonable to think that just because my dad was born in England and I spent my entire life in Australia that I would be a British citizen and therefore ineligible. I mean, that's inherently kind of dumb.
Well, and to be perfectly honest, that's created as a result of a decision in Sue versus Hill in 1999, right? If that decision had been along the lines of what our founding fathers, as in the original intent, right? I am 100% sure our founding fathers never intended for Britain to be a separate nation from Australia.
Sure, absolutely,
yeah. So the High Court inventing that as a legal fiction, right,
well,
is a little.
I don't know if they've invented it as legal fiction. I mean, it's a reality. The Australia Act kind of just severs the link between Australia.
No. It severs the link between British and It severs the link between our parliaments.
Sure.
It doesn't sever the historical link. It doesn't sever the constitutional link. It doesn't sever the link at our executive level.
Anyway, I mean, I don't think the High Court invented the notion that like Australia has completely disentangled itself from England. Like, I think that's a reality in terms of just straight up. Like, well, I mean, as you asked me a year ago if I could just walk into England and just live there, the answer I would have said is no. It turns out I can actually, so that's kind of nice. But my children, if I don't go and actually live in the UK, my children could not just walk into England and live there. Like, doesn't matter the historical link. Like if I go, like if you say, I mean, even New Zealand, I mean, theoretically you can just kind of walk in there. So it's where. In the 50s, you just go to England.
Yeah.
And because you're a citizen of the British Empire. So that was kind of the end of it. So, I think the reality is that the relationship between Australia and Britain, even if there's a historical link, the actual like functioning of the governments, the functioning of the nation, insofar as that is not a completely ridiculous idea, they're separate entities. And the High Court's the High Court really doesn't have a lot of room to like just make this sort of stuff up. Like, in some ways they reflect the reality. Like, they look at like the law and see what the law says and just apply kind of the reality of what things are like.
Sure, but even if you want to play it by that angle, and that's fine, you can play it by that angle. I can accept that argument.
Yeah.
Right? But you've clearly now opened up a situation where like these sanguineous relationships, right? Like, hey, I get citizenship from my parents or something like that. All of a sudden, that's something that precludes me from running in here. Well, I don't think the correct test is that you've taken... Sorry, I think the correct test is reasonable steps. But I think that there needs to be an additional check on that, or at least they need to apply it better, right? They need to either apply it more consistently, right? In which case, there's none of this business of some countries you actually count taking no steps as fine, and some countries,
Sure.
I think if you're going to say no steps is not fine, apply it across the board.
Well, essentially, you want to get rid of the reasonable steps bit. You just want it to be, you need to take steps, or you need to not take steps. Because, I mean, really, like, reasonable steps, like, it is reasonable to look on things online. It is unreasonable to have a mastery of Italian immigration law. You know, I mean, that would be unreasonable. Like, so, you know, I think the test is, I mean, having said all that, my original point was, though, if people are regularly being pinged by this stuff to begin with, if you knew that if you ran for parliament, somebody will challenge you if they can dig this stuff up, you would deal with it before you get to that point. Like, there wouldn't be an issue because, like, the parties, and this is really, I mean, the failing in all of this is in the parties to do their bloody job, which is to vet candidates who can run for parliament and, you know, be legitimately elected. And if basically the status quo was not, let's be cozy, let's ignore each other, if the status quo was every time you put up somebody who has some sort of, like, potentially, you know, just, you know, like, there's potentially some issues with their citizenship, we will go after them relentlessly. Then every party would relentlessly vet their candidates to make sure that they're eligible to run for parliament, and you wouldn't have these problems.
They would, and that's actually one of the beauties of the US system, because they do ningle for every little thing. Yeah, they go after. It is a no holds barred game. But like the underlying perception of people is that if you try to do something like that, it's very much seen as a very US thing, and people kind of shy away from it immediately.
I don't know. I mean, I think it really is just it's been a cozy bipartisan club. I mean, in the end, you know, the Labor and Liberal control Parliament. Like, they control the rules. You know, we've seen with the changes of the Senate how they change, you know, after every election to make it more democratic, to get rid of all those crazy 1% candidates who ended up being elected. They'll make it easier for them to promote their own incumbency, and that's how politics operates. So I think it's. You know, I think it's really just, it's been convenient for the big parties to ignore this stuff, and it's now come to bite them on the ass, and now they're going to have to do something about it.
Okay.
And I guess with that, we're over 30 minutes. So if you like our show, make sure you share and subscribe. We're on Facebook, we're on iTunes, and we're on YouTube. So you can find us all there. Taking Liberties Radio. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back again next week.
See ya.